Good morning to all. Welcome to our CONRAC meeting. My name is Rocco Ally. I function as the secretary. I am standing in for our president, Silas Chamberlain, as well as our vice president, Meredith Graham. However, both of them are attending virtually. I'm calling this meeting of the Conservation Natural Resources Advisory Board to order at 10:01 a.m. This meeting is being broadcast live in real time. Board members and guests are participating virtually. Welcome to all others who are following along remotely. This session is being recorded. By participating in this session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of this session. Meeting recordings are intended for purposes of transcription and are deleted once the meeting minutes are transcribed and approved. The actions of this meeting will be captured in the CONRAC board meeting minutes found on our website. This time, I'd like to go around those attending to introduce themselves as board members, and also that will be followed by the members that are attending virtually. All others will be our guests in attendance. We welcome all other guests who are interested in the work of the advisory board. I already introduced myself. Let's start the other way. Cindy?
Cindy Dunn, DCNR Secretary.
Bob Kirshner, St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, motorized recreation advocate.
Gary Cribbs, representing Delaware County.
Elaine Schaefer. I'm with Schuylkill River Greenways National Heritage Area and on Delaware County Council.
Xia Wang. I'm a Bureau Director for Admin Service.
Jerry Walls, in the Williamsport area, and I'm retired from being Executive Director of Lycoming County Planning for 37 years.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Greenberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Gardens Trust in the City of Philadelphia.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Ponser from Bridgeway, Pennsylvania, and I am the President of Grow Rural PA.
Hi, I'm Ryan Such, President of Grow Conservation, and I'm the Contracted Administrator of CONRAC.
Good morning, Nicole Farraguna. I am the Policy Director for DCNR as well as the Staff Liaison for CONRAC.
Geraldine, if you want to continue. Geraldine, if you want to continue.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. I'm Geraldine Umstead Singer. I'm a community volunteer from the Hershey-Hummelstown area and previous chair of CONRAC. Good morning.
Silas?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Silas Chamberlain. I'm the chair of CONRAC. Thank you again, Rocco, for filling in. I'm sorry I can't be with all of you. I'm down in New Orleans for Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives Conference. The good news is I got to spend about 90 minutes yesterday telling chamber executives from across the country why they should care about outdoor recreation as part of the work that they do. So it's been time well spent, but sorry I couldn't be with y'all there today. And I'll turn it over to Sierra.
Hi, Sierra Fogel here, President and co-owner of Pocono Whitewater Pocono Biking. And we operate in Lehigh Gorge State Park primarily, and also a few other state forests and parks around the Commonwealth.
Are there any other board members attending virtually?
See Ken.
Ken Kane.
Hello, everyone. This is Ken Kane. I'm up in Kane, McKean County, Pennsylvania. I'm a senior advisor with Generations Forestry. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but there's 8 hours of highway time was not conducive to my schedule this week.
And Marcus, I see Marcus.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Marcus Schaffner, President and CEO of the Outdoor Inclusion Coalition based in Pittsburgh. Pleasure to be with you all today.
All right. Thank you.
Good morning, Rocco.
I forget anybody. I noticed you're there.
Good morning, Rocco. This is Thad. I'm on the call as well. Thad Taylor, President of Metzler Forest Products.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Pryor with Unpaved Pennsylvania, which is focused on gravel cycling around the Commonwealth.
Okay, I think we've covered everyone. This time, I'm sorry. If we can move over to the people that are sitting to my right, start off.
Scrolls on the recreation.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, I'd like to move to our first public comment section. Ryan, do we have any public comments?
Looks like we have someone with their hand raised.
Mark has his hand.
Mark, or if you could unmute him.
Great. Good morning. It's good to be with all of you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Good to see so many familiar faces. Good to see some new faces. My name's Mark Zakutansky. I'm here to provide public comments as a volunteer event coordinator relative to the agenda item that you'll be focusing on later in your meeting. I'm not here in my professional capacity as a 17-year employee of the Appalachian Mountain Club. And I'm here to share my experience with DCNR's new activities agreement process that was implemented in 2026. And I asked the Advisory Council to help DCNR review and improve the new system. I'm here today because your agenda is going to focus more on this topic later, so I'm happy to jump back in later. I shared detailed written comments with Ryan if you'd like to access them. I'm sure Ryan could distribute them. Specifically, I'm the volunteer race director of the Lehigh Classic. It's a small annual whitewater paddling race in Lehigh Gorge State Park. We average about 40 participants every year. I've helped organize this small community event successfully for 14 years. This would be our 15th year coming up in 2026. This is the first year that we've been subjected to the new permitting process that the department put in place. I submitted a request for a special use permit for our whitewater race on January 7th of 2026 in Lehigh Gorge State Park. The event is scheduled for August 29th, giving us plenty of time to review the permit application. Unfortunately, after months of completing the requested forms, providing the insurance documents, and securing a Fish and Boat Commission permit, our completed package reached the local park staff on May 1st. And since May 1st, I still have not received a permit. Lehigh Gorge State Park staff have been caught in the middle of a confusing back and forth between Harrisburg with seemingly endless additional requests for additional paperwork and filings that, in my opinion, are unnecessary, unclear, and at many times inconsistent with the guidance provided earlier in the process. The lack of transparency and changing direction has placed an enormous burden on local park staff, and that's my biggest concern, while leaving my race organizing team without a clear path to a final decision on our request to host the 15th annual Lehigh River Whitewater Race. This is in no way a criticism of Lehigh Gorge State Park staff. In fact, quite the opposite. The Assistant State Park Manager has spent an extraordinary amount of time trying to help us navigate changing and unclear requirements from Harrisburg. A lack of transparency and clarity about what is required, when it's required, and who can resolve outstanding questions has created enormous headaches for local park staff. This is time that our local Assistant State Park Manager could be spending managing park resources and organizing interpretive programs, managing facilities, and serving visitors to the park. The Lehigh Classic Whitewater Race is not a new or complicated event. Lehigh Gorge State Park staff have worked with the event, its location, and its organizers for 14 years. During that time, our fees to apply for a special use permit were $25 every year. It required a 2-page form managed at the local level to address direct concerns of the park operations team. This year, unfortunately, our fees to the Commonwealth simply to apply for a permit increased to $320, while the process became substantially longer, more burdensome, and less predictable, with significant involvement from the Harrisburg staff, to the frustration of everyone involved, especially the Assistant State Park Manager. So I'm here to comment, and I believe that the special use permit process should be proportionate to the event that is being requested to be hosted. A recurring event like mine with 40 participants should not face the same administrative burden as a new commercial activity, such as like a Spartan race that may involve thousands of people in a park or state forest. So my concern and my reason for joining you today extends beyond simply my whitewater race. If an established event organized by a seasoned nonprofit recreation professional like myself cannot successfully and efficiently navigate your new special use permitting process efficiently, a first-time applicant may simply give up. So events like family reunions, scouting weekends, other activity clubs, and small nonprofits that want to host events in the state parks and forests should not need the tenacity and legal expertise that I've brought to bear to organize a responsible activity. I'm concerned for the burden that the new process has placed on state park staff and especially the Hickory Run complex. So I have 5 asks for you to consider today. I asked the council to recommend to the department a streamlined renewal process for successful recurring events. Number 2, provide greater decision-making authority for local state park managers and keep local state park staff from being intermediaries with Harrisburg. 3, ensure clear organizational and insurance requirements to improve the application process up front. 4, establish firm deadlines for decisions consistent with Section 213C of your regulations that requires an expeditious answer for a permit request. And 5, I request deemed approval timelines if the department does not act on a completed application for a special use activity within a reasonable period of time. I'm not requesting the department lower their standards, but to make them clear, proportionate, and timely. I understand that DCNR is here to protect public safety and natural resources, but complexity in your permitting process is not the same as accountability, and bureaucracy is not the same as resource protection. We can protect our parks while keeping them accessible to the people of Pennsylvania. I'm interested in staying for your business meeting today. I hope this perspective is valuable as you consider this topic in greater detail. I appreciate the opportunity to share these comments with you, and I thank all of you for your leadership in guiding the conservation and enjoyment of Pennsylvania's award-winning state park system. I'm not here to simply complain that I've not received my permit for this event, but it is a fact that it's July 22nd, and I still have not received my permit for my event in August. Thank you for the opportunity to share these comments with you today.
Mark, thank you for your comments. The CONRAC board will take your comments under consideration and advisement. We will respond to you in a timely manner. Thank you. Ryan, any other public comments?
Not unless someone else has raised their hand, which I don't see. We did receive a few other comments in written format via email or the CONRAC comment form on the website, which have been distributed to council members and, as Rocco said, will be considered and appropriate responses made.
Thank you, Ryan. This time, the minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed for all to look over. Do I hear a motion to approve the same?
So moved.
Second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Debbie. All those in favor of, are there any comments from our virtual attendees, Geraldine, Silas?
Rocco, I'd just say Meredith caught one minor typo. A month need to be corrected, which I've already done.
Okay, thank you. The minutes then, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes, which we have? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The minutes are approved as corrected. Okay, at this time, Silas, I'm going to refer to you for our council report.
Great. Thank you, Rocco. And thanks again for leading the meeting. Just wanted to thank the staff that will report on today's council meeting regarding glamping and also the activity agreements. As you just heard from Mark, it's very much a timely topic, one that has been underway for well over a year now, and is something where CONRAC can play an active role in being an intermediary between private businesses and private event organizers and DCNR. So I'm grateful for the DCNR staff that have put their time into it and are speaking on it. And in particular, Sierra and Dave Pryor for offering their perspectives as well in addition. So I think it's a great and timely topic on something that's really important to all of us. I did want to just mention that our work has proceeded on our rules of procedure, which are in effect our bylaws. Thank you to the working group who has met to help review those and make recommendations. We are considering this the formal introduction of those rules of procedure, and we'll vote on them at our next public meeting. So all the CONRAC members have received the red line version of the suggested changes, and those will be part of the public meeting minutes from this meeting, so they'll be available to the public as well. As you'll see, as you review, and as I think we've kind of previewed in the past, this is not an overall overhaul of our rules of procedure. This is really a refresh. It does things like align the terms of our officers and members to January 1st so that they're on the calendar year instead of beginning at roughly the fiscal year. It does things like add a clause that every 5 years, whether we think we need to or not, we revisit the procedures and just make sure that they're all relevant. And it does things like update the language around CONRAC having an executive director versus a DCNR liaison. So a lot of good housekeeping, and it's a good practice to take a look at those periodically. But I think as you'll review them, there won't be anything that dramatically changes the way that CONRAC operates or the rules that we operate under. So please do review it in advance of the next meeting, because we will have it on the agenda for final action and adoption at that time. In anticipation of those being approved, we did not hold our officer elections in July, which I believe it would have been happening now, because we were anticipating switching to that January timeline. So, this will get us back on track for what we anticipate from the bylaws or the rules of procedure. Before I move on, any comments or questions about the rules of procedure? Okay. I did want to offer one update from my working group on economic development, and then one from Ephraim, who is not able to join us today. And then I'll turn it over to any other working group chairs that would like to offer an update. From our economic contributions work group, I guess. I just wanted to share that in partnership with the Office of Outdoor Recreation, the Outdoor Business Alliance of Pennsylvania launched what is called the Pennsylvania Trout Tank Grant Program. This is like Shark Tank, but the nice Pennsylvania version. And it provides grants of $500 to $2,500 to outdoor businesses. It launched back on July 8th. It closes August 7th. And applications have been rolling in for that from private businesses across Pennsylvania. They are very flexible grants intended to allow businesses to fund whatever it is that they need to elevate their business and kind of improve its health and take it to the next level. There are a lot of resources at obapa.org for you to check out the grant guidelines, the application portal, and frequently asked questions, as well as a recording on the grant program itself. So we're grateful to all of our partners who helped make that possible. And it's a direct outcome of the work that CONRACT has actively participated in through Elevate and through the office and through the Outdoor Business Alliance of Pennsylvania. So that was my update for that working group. And Ephraim sent his apologies that he could not be here, but the Park and Forest Infrastructure Group did have a productive meeting back on June 10th. The committee members met with the DCNR Bureau of Facility Design and Construction. This was more of a general meeting and introduction to allow committee members to ask questions of facility design and construction team, to talk a little bit about CONRAC and our role, and really just build that relationship so that we can continue to communicate openly and interact in the future. Ezra himself has continued to represent CONRAC on the Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation Policy Advocacy Committee. And there'll be ongoing discussions around recreation infrastructure and how to support DCNR's conservation and rec objectives. So just a quick update from Ephraim, but that was a productive meeting. And thanks to everybody that could join for it. So at this time, I'll just open it up to any other working group chairs that would like to offer any updates. And following that, we can move on in the agenda. Thanks, Rocco.
This time, hearing no other working groups to come up, I'd like to ask
Yeah, I'd just like to offer from the Recreation Group. I'll be stepping down as the co-chair of the Recreation Group, and my very able co-chair to my left here, Gary Cribbs, will be taking on the full responsibility for the activities of the group. We did not have a meeting between meetings last month, and so I have nothing further to offer there, but I just I wanted to thank everybody for their patience and diligence and participation over the years in the group, and I'm sure that we have a bright future with Gary's leadership. So thank you for the service over the years.
Thank you, Bob, for your service, and please stay in touch with us. Jerry?
I did.
Gary Cribbs. I'm going to remain as a member of the group, just to continue to be a problem, I guess.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks to those who have traveled in from afar, and thanks to those online. Really, like I said very often, I think transparency and public process is very important, and I make the CONRAC meetings I can. I think you made a wise switch to having the field trip earlier, even though you didn't have great weather, but still, I think May was a better time for the field trip, and this is a good time to be in air conditioning. So thanks for that. And it seems like I always start these with a congratulations on CONRAC members getting awards. It seems like Bob and Marcus and others have gotten awards, and we start every comment period. So I just have a regular part of my comments that's going to be congratulations. But this time, CONRAC Vice Chair Rocco Ali was awarded at the Governor's Environmental Excellence Awards just a few weeks ago, and he's Associate Director for the Armstrong Conservation District, and they got an award for the Glade Run Stream Bank Restoration, Stabilization, and Fish Habitat Project. That project installed 1,500 feet of fish habitat structures, riparian vegetation, and prevented excess pollution from getting into the stream. And another award, yet another award to Conrac Chair Silas Chamberlain. I don't know that his wall has space for any more awards, but he was part of the York County Rail Trail Authority team that was recognized for the Oil Creek Floodplain Restoration Project, which restored 3,800 linear feet of stream channel, created 11 acres of wetlands, and removed 80,000 cubic yards of nutrient-rich sediment in the valley bottom as a result of the trail expansion work. That project's like a super good example of how recreation and conservation really can go hand in hand. When you get money for a recreation project, you can really do the restoration and stream work. And that, both good examples. So let's have a round of applause to our awardees. I know the other awards out there, it just seems like we have a award-rich group here. Budget's very much on mind. The governor just signed a $50.85 billion budget, which was passed with bipartisan support. DCNR's overall budget is $643 million, including $112 million in general fund allocations. Mike Walsh, our deputy for admin, likes to point out that we're a half of a penny of general fund if you look at the state budget as a dollar. So we're not a big budget item for the general fund, but we deliver a lot of value to the public for that half a penny on the dollar. So Shaw Wong has very ably navigated us through the budget process, which is actually a year-long process, and she'll be presenting more detail. So this is the fourth budget passed during the Shapiro administration. It builds on a lot of the investments of the past. It gives us operational funds. It allows us to continue the work we're doing. And it supports our efforts to strengthen safety on public lands, bring the parks and trails to every community. Again, we're operating on a strategy to bring a park and a trail within 10 minutes of every Pennsylvanian, and this will allow us to continue on that direction. Allows us to continue to grow the outdoor recreation economy, which is at $20.4 billion in Pennsylvania, the most current numbers, and it increases and holds our ability to continue GIS mapping, geology, and all the good work we do there, as well as steward and manage 125 state parks and 2.2 million acres of forest that remain free and accessible for all Pennsylvanians. This is the summer season. For a lot of people, it's a time to lay back and kick back. For DCNR, it's game on. It's been a busy summer. It's had its challenges, but some of the positives, the America 250 PA celebration was big in Pennsylvania, as you might expect, or America 250 things happening all across public lands and private lands and the communities. But for us at DCNR, besides the NFL draft, we hosted a big concert at Point State Park on July 4th. A lot of major events. The holiday weekend was busy as always, despite some challenging weather. We've had challenging storms rolling across the state, which have created, incidents and challenges in the parks. Obviously, we keep public safety in mind, keeping trails open, keeping facilities open with the many storms has been a challenge. It's also we've had heat incidents from visitors and staff. So we continue to put out safety messages around heat exhaustion, heat stroke. And that's a challenge for outdoor recreation, and something we really beat the drum on: hydration and staying cool and taking care of and paying attention to symptoms. Again, with the air quality situation we've had from the Canadian wildfires, that's presented another challenge for staff and visitors, giving people appropriate warning, keeping staff safe and managing their outdoor work, and thinking about that, but also alerting the public, but also, it's a big public land base, and giving people the tools they need to make their own decisions about what makes sense for them when the weather and the air quality is challenging. I think this is going to be an increasing thing we'll deal with climate change. And so continuing on that vein is something that we'll continue to pay a lot of attention to. We've also been sharing a lot of safety messaging around water-based recreation, with climate change and warming temperatures, people are and will head to water more and more, and continuing and building on the messaging to keep people safe in water is really important. We always continue to beat the drum on ATV and motorized safety, and that's something is top of mind. We will have a ATV safety event on August 20th to continue that. We're working with Denton Go, Snowmobile and AT Advisory Committee, the PAHOV on that event. So you can, any Conrac member that's interested in that, talk to one of us, and we'll make sure you get that information. Just a sidebar comment on Mark's comments about the activities agreement. We will take that comment very seriously, Mark. It's not the only concern we've had. I know there's been some growing pains in this new process. And one of the ones you pointed out is throwing a net, trying to figure out what should be in that net, what shouldn't. And I certainly don't think we're capturing family reunions. I hope we're not. Mostly they rent a pavilion and are good to go. But Mark, you may have volunteered to be an advisor. So if your phone number is not on that letter, we'll reach back out to you to fine tune that advice. But we hear you. We've heard from some other users. We know we don't have the new process perfect, and I think we'll be working pretty hard to make it a lot better. You'll hear more about it in this agenda. BRC updates. So the grant round 32 had closed on April 30th, and they received 451 applications, requesting 115.1 million. Of course, that's significantly more than we'll have available. It's a record number of applications to the grant portal, and the staff are really actively reviewing the grant proposals right now. Grant round 32.1, the ATV snowmobile, is closed on March 31st. There are 15 applications requesting 3.65 million. Application reviews are ongoing, and the recommendation meetings, where they work through them, are scheduled already for later this month and in August. And then the ATV snowmobile grant program will open on August 3rd and close September 30th. As you recall, the legislature directed a quarterly process for those. The DCNR awards grants from the ATV and snowmobile management restricted accounts for projects that are proposing land acquisition, planning, development, rehab, maintenance, equipment, and educational programs for ATV and snowmobile trails and facilities. Okay, so Trail of the Year, we are, the advisory committee, the Pennsylvania Trails Advisory Committee is now accepting nominations for Trail of the Year. As you probably remember, we asked the advisory committee to do that process. This year's Trail of the Year is the Pine Creek. So you've got that on your agenda. It's September 25th, we're celebrating that. And also it encourages people, if you haven't been, or plan on, whether you have or haven't been, come to a Greenways and Trails Summit. This is the year that they have Eastern and Western PA Greenways and Trails Summits. Look at our webpage or our partners' webpage if you're interested. But they're really an energetic gathering of where people learn from each other. Trail managers learn from each other. We put a lot of technical information out there. We celebrate a lot about the many victories that happen across the trail world every year. Turning to some forestry issues, forest fire protection is top of mind. Of course, there were 924 wildfires burning about 1,000 acres so far this calendar year. That's more fires, but a lot less acreage. So that the acreage is well below average. We do, it's looking like we could have a fall wildfire season here. So, stay tuned on that. As much as there has been weather events, not all of them have consistently put down enough rain to change the drought conditions in some areas in Pennsylvania. We've completed 55 controlled burns that treated 1,100 acres. 400 personnel attended the Wildland Fire Academy at Shippensburg in May. We are training up more staff and advertising the opportunity for wildfire training for more staff. The reason being, we may have more than one significant wildfire incident happening at a time. Again, driven by climate change and conditions, our spring wildfire season has gotten a bit bigger at times, like last year was really big. So we know we need more wildfire trained staff. We are actually actively mobilizing right now to support wildfire management across multiple western states and an emerging situation in northern Minnesota. So we've been mobilized 22 staff so far, but I expect that to go up a lot here in the coming weeks. Forest health, we have a robust forest health program. As you know, the spongy moth and fall cankerworm treatment was completed. We treated 3,100 acres. Hemlock woolly adalga treatments are underway and continue into the fall. Aerial surveys are underway right now for the damage that's been done. And we are collaborating with the New Jersey lab with the field research phase of knotweed biocontrol. We get a lot of complaints on knotweed. In fact, I just was out on the river islands, Sheets Island archipelago, that are managed by forestry, and knotweed is just taken over the the vegetation on those islands. So this knotweed control, this biocontrol, will be really interesting to see if that can work. That's really quite a problem in riparian areas, particularly. We're also working on a lot of other invasive plant issues, including wavy leaf basket grass, 5-leaf Aralia, and honeysuckle, among other invasive plants. So that's, if you talk to our foresters, they really point to invasive species and forest pests as one of the main stressors on the system. Silviculture, so far this year, 23 sales have been opened for 3,400 acres and about $6 million in revenue. There are 15 sales currently out to bid for 2,100 acres. So we are keeping up on our planning for ecosystem-based management using silviculture. On that note, there's a big milestone coming for the Bureau of Forestry, for state forests across over the years. It would be the sale of 1 billion board feet of sustainably managed timber. This reflects decades of responsible forest stewardship ever since we adopted ecosystem-based management in the 90s, and a dedicated effort of many staff and stakeholders and companies that have really helped make sure this happens. So CONRAC members, if you're interested in attending that, it'll be October 9th from 11 to 2 at the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum up along Route 6. So if you're interested in being part of that, I know we have a lot of forestry people here in CONRAC. Put that date on your calendar, October 9th, up on Route 6. And I believe that's all I have for now. And thanks for the opportunity.
You want to field questions?
Do we do that? Yeah. Yeah, I can field questions. Jerry.
It's not really a question, but while you're here, I'd just like to make the announcement that our 22 county nonprofit, the Susquehanna Greenway Partnership, will be conducting an outdoor exposition August 1st at the Shikellamy State Park. And it is usually a well-attended event, including local DCNR folks, but a lot of boating activity. In fact, we offer a training session for a short float by a kayak. So it's teaching people how to kayak and safety procedures and whatnot. So, but there's a whole range of things. Local makers of all kinds of stuff, a lot of it from natural resources, are offered for sale.
Good, thanks, Jerry. Yes, that's it. We have our eye on that event. I know some staff are coming, and that section of river, the middle Susquehanna from below the dam on down has a lot of river islands managed by DCNR Forestry, and a wonderful place to paddle and focus on. So, and of course that spot's very important because that's where the West Branch and North Branch come together. Susquehanna's, I think, we take that for granted. Susquehanna is the largest East Coast contiguous river, so it's quite an asset to the center of the state.
Any other questions for the secretary? Okay, I'd like to move on and introduce Shaw Wang to give us a budget update.
Oh, there is. I guess I was wrong. It's less than a half a penny.
Good morning. Good morning. Just as the secretary said, the budget was enacted on July 12th, and the overall general fund in the enacted budget is 50.8 billion. DCNR's share in general fund is 112 million. It's about 0.23% of the overall general fund. But the overall DCNR's budget is 643 million to support the daily operation of state parks, state forests, to maintenance and other DCNR priorities. So overall, it's a cost to carry budget. There's some decrease in federal grants, which is about 19 million decrease in federal grants. However, please keep in mind the decrease of the 19 million is not real grant money. It's just spending authority. We put the number there. The overall grant money is basically a little bit increase because we receive a sub-grant from DEP this year. This is brand new to us. That's addition to our federal grants. So another thing I would like to remind people is for Keystone and ESF fund. For now, we received 18 million ESF fund and 85 million for Keystone funds. That's the initial funding. We will receive a second round, very possibly we are going to receive a second round of funding in end of June. We called it true ups. So by that time, we will know our number, the final number of our budget. I take any questions about fiscal or budget related questions now, if you have any.
Any questions for Shaw at this time? Policy report with Nicole.
I guess, Rocco, I do have a question. Madam Secretary, is that an increase over last year's budget for DCNR or same, or what perspective?
Call a cost to carry increase. It'll cover the increase operational costs. It allows us to build on the work we've done to date. So it's, the analogy I like to do is the jeans tight or the jeans loose or the jeans fit. The jeans fit. So it's cost to carry. And we'll be able to continue and build on the work we do.
Yeah, to cover any CPI, inflations over last year.
Okay, moving on to Nicole.
Thank you, Rocco. Shaw, thank you for being here to provide that budget update. We all have sighed a great sigh of relief to have the budget passed. And now it won't be long before we start the new budget process, right? So that will happen over the course of the next few weeks. I also wanted to congratulate Silas and Rocco as well for being recognized at the Governor's Environmental Excellence Awards in June. It really is a really cool event. Really great projects highlighted. If you haven't had a chance to attend, I encourage you to and also I encourage you to nominate the great projects that are happening in your community, right? It's a really great way to show appreciation for the great work happening around the state. Just a quick update on the Wildlife Connectivity Interagency Work Group. So we're off to a great start. We've been meeting a lot. We have monthly meetings of the interagency work group. We have a project governance team that's been helping to kind of move things forward. There's a lot of coordination happening between the two co-leads, PennDOT and DCNR. We are in the process now of developing focus teams around data analysis and mapping and conservation prioritization. These two are really kind of the cornerstone of the process. And as you may recall, the ultimate goal of the work group is to really establish a comprehensive wildlife connectivity strategic plan that represents the needs of the Commonwealth. So we're building out these focus teams. The data analysis and mapping team is really going to be responsible for collecting and synthesizing data, relevant data sets, really helping us to understand which data sets are necessary to take us to that next level of conservation prioritization, which will really help us to identify infrastructure and conservation priorities. I will keep you updated as the process continues. Our goal is to have a draft plans in sometime in the spring of 2027. That timeline may shift a little bit. As you may recall, the PennDOT has received US DOT funding, which is helping to support this project. But the DCNR is very much committed to this work, working with our partners. And really excited to have the governor's support behind this as well as a key priority. So, and then I think I may have noted this last time, and I know I just sent CONRAC an email. We can include this in our minutes as well. DCNR is updating the list of classified plants in the regulation, the conservation of Pennsylvania native wild plants. This is a big deal. This is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time for our staff to go through these different species to determine the various classifications. This includes 136 substantive changes, including additions, deletions, and reclassifications. DCNR is accepting comments up until August 1st, so CONRAC certainly has the opportunity to provide input. I'll include again the materials in the minutes, so the public also has an opportunity to review those materials, and DCNR will plan to publish those regulations sometime in the fall. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Nicole. Any questions for Nicole?
Just a quick question. In the wildlife connectivity, is the Game Commission participating in that? And how active are they? I know coming from Elk County, we had an issue with the elk on Route 255. And the Game Commission really took the lead there. So good to hear. Working.
Yes, it has been a really great start. So we have 11 agencies, including the resource agencies, Fish and Boat, Game Commission, DCNR, DEP, of course, Department of Insurance, PHMC, Historical and Museum Commission, DCD, DGS, just anyone who can potentially has a touch point on this. And PGC has not only been committed in terms of attending the wildlife connectivity meetings, but also assigning staff to the focus team. So both game and fish have been very committed to the process and very excited to see this move forward.
Any other questions for Nicole? Okay, if we can move on for a legislative report from Eric Nelson. I believe you're attending virtually.
Yep, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. As Cindy noted, the budget did pass, so the House and the Senate are on break this summer. However, The House will be back in session tomorrow for a voting, actually, no, on Thursday, I'm sorry, for a voting session at 9:30 a.m. to deal with a court case dealing with second-degree murder offenses. So they'll be back in, I think, for the day on Thursday, and then they'll break until September. I'll just mention briefly that the budget did not include a fee adjustment for ATV and snowmobiles this time around again. We're still working with the legislature on crafting language that would allow for the fee increase. Other than that, I don't really have anything to add other than what Cindy mentioned earlier. If you have any questions, I'll take them.
Eric, thanks for the report. I'm wondering, I think that those of us involved in the activity understand that not only are the fees outdated, the entire snowmobile ATV law is outdated. It was written at a time when side-by-side ATVs didn't even exist. And I'm wondering if this would be an opportunity, since we have a 2-year window here coming up with the new legislature, to totally undertake a total rewrite of the snowmobile ATV law. I think it's got to be addressed at some point, and I think it's long overdue. And I'm just looking for an opportunity to bring us into the mid-21st century.
I think that's the plan going forward. We have started working on language that would, kind of gut and replace some of, the ATV snowmobile provisions in Title 75. So I do think that's going to be the plan moving forward. I think that's the way to go.
And I will note, I know that there has been conversations internally and us talking to PennDOT as well. Of course, we'd also need to talk to state police. And I think that is also an opportunity for CONRAC to provide some input as well, right? So we can certainly keep you informed as things move forward.
Well, I would hope that there would be heavy input from the Snowmobile ATV Advisory Committee. I think that they certainly understand the sport they're involved in, and I think going without their input would be not lead to the best result.
Absolutely.
Any further comment? Okay, if we can move on to our presentations, I'd like to ask that questions from each presentation from board members be held to the end. And the first presenter is Josh Zimmerman from the Bureau of State Parks.
Morning. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. My name is Jason Zimmerman, Assistant Director of State Parks. I oversee field operations for our now 125 state parks. I was asked to talk a little bit about the partnership between state parks and Timberline Glamping. So we'll talk through my PowerPoint here at Timberline, Pennsylvania. So this year we undertook a partnership with Timberline. It's a unique combination of outdoor comfort in a hotel-like setting, but in the natural outdoors. Timberline Glamping is a company that has been working with a number of state parks in the southeastern part of the country. They have offerings in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama in their state park systems. And at a conference a few years back in Alabama, we saw their setup at Alabama State Parks outside of Gulf Shores, and thought this was something that we could bring to Pennsylvania State Parks. It allows people access to the outdoors in a more comfortable environment for those that aren't really willing to jump outside their comfort zone or may not have the financial wherewithal to buy the equipment necessary to make that outdoor jump. We've also learned it also helps folks that are at the other end of their camping career widows, widowers, folks that don't want to be lugging the tent equipment or the 30, 40-foot RV into a campsite. They have the ability to still utilize our campgrounds, similar to how they have their whole life. Like I said, it's similar to a hotel room in the woods. Affordable price point. They do offer dynamic pricing. It's about $139 to $189 per night. One of the things that Timberline prides themselves on is they are all American made. All the canvases that are part of the tent are manufactured in Denver, Colorado. They're also a company that prides themselves on working with local communities. So as their platform grows in Pennsylvania, they're working with a lot of our other outdoor partners to try and develop relationships and partnerships for add-ons, to showcase some of their local products in their camping experience. So as you can see here, and I'll go through some specifics on the two main type of tent rentals that you can have. They have that tent feeling, like I said, a hotel room. They're very similar to our modern cabins, minus the restrooms for the most part. They do a lot, and they make a lot of effort to tie everything together, including the park and local community, as I mentioned. Some of the amenities within the tent are a mini fridge, a Keurig coffee, climate control mini splits, indoor living space, decor, and then all the traditional campsite amenities you would find at a state park. So your fire ring, your picnic table. They have the Adirondack chairs, which are a nice touch. They provide hammocks, everything to make that cozy atmosphere at a state park. And all of these sites that they are utilizing are placed on one of our traditional state park campsites. They can utilize everything off our 30 amp, 50 amp pedestal at a state park site. Timberline does all the maintenance and turnover, so they have their own franchisees or staff that will come out and change the bedding and everything between stays. They have their own reservation platform separate from our reservation platform. So they handle all the management and maintenance and administration of the campsite within the state park. So overall, we have 54 sites that are proposed in 7 state parks. If you take a look at the map, it's somewhat clear. There's 3 yellow stars in the eastern part of the state. Those are places that have sites mobilized and open to the public right now. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And then we also have 4 other sites in central and western Pennsylvania that are in progress to get up and running. We were very deliberate in trying to make sure that we had sites spread out across the state to give everybody that access to those sites. Most sites will be one of 2 layouts, which I'll talk about, but there are some sites at French Creek that have ensuite bathrooms included in the tent package. So it's really a good setup there. The season lengths season lengths will follow our existing campground season lengths. So if a campground's open April to October, that's when these sites are open. They also follow all of our rules and regulations. So what is being done in the campsite next to a glamping campsite applies to the folks in the glamping campsite. For the units that do not have restrooms in them, they're placed, like I said, on an existing campsite and reasonable walking distance to a restroom facility. So of the 54 sites that are proposed, it totals about 12,000 reservation nights across the system. And there's a minimum of $250,000 return in 2027. We are working with Timberline Glamping as a pilot agreement we have with them right now. It's a 5-year agreement. They pay us to utilize each site that they use. And then there's also a percentage of adjusted gross receipts that comes back to the Commonwealth. We took out underutilized sites, the 54 sites that are used for Timberline. These are sites that were underutilized for whatever reason. Some of them we put some improvements into, but we took those less attractive sites and put Timberline on those sites. So we weren't taking prime sites away from our existing visitors. So it's a net win for us there. Like I said, there's mainly two types of tents. This is the double safari tent, and this just shows some of the accommodations inside. And then we have the deluxe safari tent, which is the more family friendly, I guess. There's a king size bed and then 2 sets of bunks. Both tent types will be on the same size platform. So over time, if they feel like the safari is more attractive and more utilized than the double, they can swap things out. Timberline has extra stuff on site to prepare, like in case something gets damaged or vandalized. They have extra stuff on site to make sure that no one stays impacted. And then this is just I think this is pretty neat, like a bathroom in the tent. This is just what that furnishing looks like for the ensuite bathrooms that are in 3 of the installations at French Creek State Park. Then I mentioned there's add-ons. So in addition to the base fee, you have the ability to feel like there's 100 different options, anything from a s'more making kit to a backpack that is full of like bingo and other games to get people to go out and explore the park. Some of which are working with our staff to help create those packages. Cornhole, the screened-in tent for bugs. Those are all add-ons that you can get as part of the package. And then my last slide here is just on the implementation. So a rollout began in the spring of this year. We started at French Creek in March. We have 2 areas of French Creek that are utilized, and they're doing very well. I think the fact that it's close to a population center certainly helps that. We opened up Hickory Run and Promised Land just a few weeks ago. Things are going well there. And then we have additional site openings at Cadorus, Hills Creek, Laurel Hill, and Pymatuning, which could potentially happen this year, but most likely will happen in 2027. Like I said, this is a pilot, so as we go through this year, we'll evaluate how things go. And if there's an opportunity to expand the program, we would certainly take a look at that. And then questions.
Any questions from the board?
I just have one question. This is Geraldine. How much does it cost for a family to spend like a weekend in one of these facilities?
So the base rate is $139 to $189. Then there's also a transaction fee and a cleaning fee. Those are one time. I don't know what those are off the top of my head, but the facility's clean. So if you're there, if the cleaning fee is $50, it's $50 whether you're there one night or you're there 10 nights. It's pretty comparable to a hotel room.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, or Jeanette? Yeah, I did. Oh. There you go.
I was just wondering, you mentioned that they have their own reservation platform. Is it linked from the state park reservation site also?
Yeah, and also our park website.
Okay.
So there's ways for them to connect.
To find it,
Yep.
yeah.
You mentioned the states that offer this, but I didn't get that down on my notes. I'd like to.
Yeah, Alabama State Parks, Florida State Parks, and Georgia State Parks. And then they're also in a number of other private and county park ventures across the Southeast. Up until Pennsylvania, the northernmost site that they were open was in Williamsburg, Virginia location.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, I know dynamic pricing is kind of in the news today. Does DCNR have any control over that range of dynamic pricing? Could I be paying $400 a night for a glamping tent if it's a 4th of July or something like that?
So the price fee structure right now, because they're up and going, even though it's called dynamic, is staying in that 139 to 189 or whatever I said. They have to review all the pricing with us every year as part of the agreement, so we can provide them feedback. Obviously, our hope and theirs is too, they don't want to be pricing people out. And we don't want to be doing that either. We want this to be part of our continuum of overnight accommodations. So it's a little bit more than our typical overnight stay, but you're getting a little bit more with what's being offered. So we will continue to monitor that.
And you had a, go ahead.
Do you want to use a microphone?
Go
Use the
on.
microphone.
Thanks, Jason. So this is a super service that we're adding on that we've never been able to provide previously, which I think is great. But I also think there's another great side of it. And if you could explain a little bit about the business side of things and how State Parks is taking advantage of that. Maybe not taking advantage of, but getting reimbursed for providing that business opportunity.
Yeah, so contractually, they pay us, I believe it's $20 per site for the duration of the season. So if they're taking 8 sites off our reservation system, they're paying for those 8 sites for the duration that the campground's open. And then there's a 7% gross fee that comes back to us. And again, these are underutilized sites. So, we stand at a minimum to make $150,000 more off of those sites than we would have if they would have been left as is. And then not just from the business end of things, but these are more visits and more people we're getting into our state parks and different people that would have come to camp or use a cabin. So we're providing that access and that opportunity for other folks that we wouldn't have probably reached with some of our existing setups. Question?
Sorry, but I didn't hear you.
Yep. I just was wondering what you think the future looks like. So this is obviously a pilot. I'm assuming you're assessing how it goes. But are we looking at something that might be widespread across the state park system in the future? Or do you think it'll always be at a few select parks? Or have you and you're thinking about it yet?
No, I mean, we've given it some thought. I think before we want to go too far, we want to see how the first season or two goes. I think we have a number of state parks in the variety of parks that are open to overnight and have camping facilities that this makes sense at a handful of other parks. And I think, after we see how this goes, we wanted to take a look at that. There's a big chunk of the central part of the state that's open. There's a lot of openness in the PA Wilds that we want to take a look at. To be honest, some of our selections were based on where we know we have infrastructure projects coming up. So restrooms and decent restrooms were part of our selection process for the 7 sites that were chosen. There's some other great sites that are going to be undergoing some campground shower house projects in the near future that we held off on installing timberline at those sites until we have those new shower houses there. So we're taking a look at that. I think we have a rough list of other potential project sites once we get to that point.
Okay, any other questions for Jason? And moving on to the next presentation with Heather from the Bureau of State Parks and Jessica Scott from the Bureau of Forestry.
All right. Good morning. My name is Jessica Scott. I am with the Bureau of Forestry.
And Heather. Good morning. Make sure my UN speaker works. Heather Bollinger, I'm with the Bureau of State Parks.
We're going to talk a little bit about the DCNR activity process and our agreement update. So most of you know this, but Bureau of Forestry and Bureau of State Parks, we manage our lands a little bit differently, and we have different spaces. So for example, 2.2 million acres of forest is a wide swath of recreational opportunity. And this is managed by our 20 unique forest districts versus state parks,
State parks, we have 125 state parks, newly 125, just about a little over 300,000 acres. Jason conveniently showed our map that we are split into 4 regions that are overseen by 14 divisions. So we now have a really great landscape-wide oversight of our state parks.
So what is the activity program? In case, I think we're all on the same page, but in case we're not, let's put us there. So we're talking about any activity that a third party would like to hold on DCNR land. And this is in our regulations that they would need written permission from the department to hold that activity. It includes activities that are free or for a fee, so it doesn't really matter if the organizer is charging a fee or not. It does not include concession services solicited by the department. That's a different process, and that's not really what we're talking about here today. So some examples, youth organizations like 4-H or other organizations, scouts that want to have a group activity, group gatherings such as ceremonies, weddings. Weddings is a big part of this. Experiential opportunities, races and tournaments is a large part of this conversation as well. Festivals and concerts, group hikes, bike rides, guided services, filming, photography, and commercial services. Commercial services is another big part of this conversation as well.
So recap of 2025, we've been updating this program for a couple years, trying to realize improvements that are beneficial for everyone. Agreement, and I probably have glossed over more than I should have, so I'll back up. And there are 2 types of agreements in DCNR, one that is pre-approved and one is not pre-approved. So a non-pre-approved agreement is just a unique agreement. It's a concession agreement that we need to put unique terms and conditions. It's a lease agreement that we need to put, unique terms and conditions, something that isn't standardized. Pre-approved agreement is something that we have 30 or more in a year, and OGC has said, yes, you guys do a lot of these. And if you can standardize them, and basically the only thing that changes is, the event sponsor, their address, their phone number, the fee, the date, everything else is standardized. So to get a pre-approved agreement, we have to draft it, submit it to Office of General Counsel, and they will then approve it. So sorry for glossing over that as far as what does that mean? So right now we have the activities agreement is a pre-approved agreement. The version that we had before had not been reviewed since 2013, and Office of General Counsel told us, hey, it's time for you guys to review this. And that's why the event sponsors saw, when we implemented it last year, the updated agreement. What we did is, I don't think we changed it a whole lot, other than we did take some special conditions that we saw a lot, like please don't litter, pick up after yourselves, like just some of these general things, and we brought them into the agreement. So we didn't have to keep repeating them in the special agreement.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, in case you haven't picked it up, these agreements, they are legal documents. So our legal team is part of that piece of the puzzle. So it's not just Heather and myself and our teams going through these, it's a legal process as well. So.
Thank you for pointing that out, Jess. Yeah, this isn't a permit in the sense of like a DEP permit that you get for, Chapter 105. This is a legal contract that you enter into with DCNR to hold events onto our land. We, per our rules and regs, we regulate commercial activity, we regulate group activities, and that's for both the park and forest operations as well as protecting the resource. And I mean, most of the time we certainly want to get to yes as far as sure, just we then, lay out how you get to that yes. And so it also standardized, like before we had a multitude of different agreements, like special activities agreement, a commercial activities agreement, and we can just condense that. That way that there weren't like so many different agreements and had to figure out like which one you fit in. It also helped forestry, I think, a lot in that you only had one type of agreement that was pre-approved. So that meant every activity that you tried to get through like had to go through the whole legal process. And it was pretty inefficient and I think painful for both state or forestry staff as well as our event sponsors. So that realized an efficiency to get that agreement pre-approved. We still do have the letter of authorization that is not reviewed in the legal sense. We use that for things that are less risky or smaller groups. We also have dedicated staffing. This is new. Both Parks and Forests have a dedicated staff member that manages the respective activity programs. Before, we had staff members that was just part of their duties. But we felt with the increase in interest and a number of events, as well as wanting to show that we're dedicated to, let's say solving this problem, making it more efficient, we now each have a staff member dedicated to that. But we still rely on our local staff to facilitate the agreement drafting requirements and face-to-face relationships with the activity sponsor. We definitely did not want to lose that, park and forest level face-to-face relationship that our event sponsors, licensees have developed over the years. And, the local park manager or local, district forester also are the ones that know their parks the best and are putting those special conditions, such as use this parking lot, but not that parking lot. Your event has to conclude by, noon because you're shutting down a portion of the day use area. They're the ones that really know their parks well and help manage or coordinate the event with those event sponsors. Something that is important, but we didn't add to the slideshow is another action is the centralized website for application. And then we updated our public facing info on DCNR website because we kind of looked at, where are the pinch points, where are, things that we can easily update. And we realized that our DCNR, our forward facing website had some incorrect information on it. So we thought, well, we can do that really easily. So we updated that. And then we created the centralized application, and I think we'll cover why we did that in a next couple slides.
I think the intent of the website, obviously, to get information out there. It was updated mid 2025, but it's an evolving site. So we do plan to continue to add more information up there as we get questions from the public, frequently asked questions, just for that clarity and transparency piece.
And so why did we make those changes? We had feedback from event sponsors, over the years, but as well as, people just calling, emailing, talking to our staff, and then in forums where we've, formally collected feedback. The desire for consistency across the system in both parks and forests, both in fees and agreement types. That was the message we heard loud and clear, that people were going from forest to forest, from park to park, and they were getting a different experience with the, the staff, with the fees, and why is that? So we understood that. And we just wanted, that consistency. And then also the demand, increase in demand and process expectations required a faster process. Again, we also heard that they would, submit a request, an email, and sometimes there was a formal acknowledgement, sometimes there wasn't, and they were just kind of waiting to see if they could have their event. So that's something that we desired, that you would get, a formal response, received or passed on within, 30 days, that they would at least get an acknowledgement of the application. And then just that the desire for front-facing web-enabled application process.
So we talked a lot about the updated process. So what is the updated process? On the screen here, you'll see a very simplified version of that. Hearing stories, especially the comment earlier from Mark, it's a little bit more complex than what we have on the screen, but in theory, we start off with the website. That's why we put it together. There's a link on the website where folks can submit their application. So that activity sponsor applies for that activity online through the online application. They provide some basic information about what they want to do and how they want to do it. That comes into a centralized point. And I think that centralized staffing on forestry and park side, that's a key for that consistent voice. So we have the same person reviewing those applications for forestry. We have the same person reviewing those applications for parks. So that same set of eyes providing consistent thoughts as we move through the application process. So once a sponsor submits their application online, it's reviewed by that activity specialist. They're checking for preliminary information such as, hey, does this even warrant permission from the department? Sometimes we get folks submitting things. It's like, you don't need to go through this process. Here's how you do your activity or your thing that you want to do. We're looking to make sure if it has enough information. We're looking to make sure the location is correct. Believe it or not, people confuse Bald Eagle State Forest with Bald Eagle State Park. It happens a lot and a lot of other crossover areas. So we have that initial set of eyes just reviewing that basic information to make sure everything's all right. And if it's not, they'll reach out to the organizer and get some of that initial information. Then the specialist from central office will work with the corresponding field staff, whether it's a forest district or a state park. Sometimes we have events that cross over between districts and state parks. So we're getting everybody involved to determine what the best agreement type is. If it's an LOA, it's an activity agreement. And the specifics of that agreement, like Heather said, if there's parking lot issues or if there's a timber sales situation that we need to discuss with the organizer prior to moving forward. Then once we work with our field staff to make sure everything's okay to move forward, we then reach back out to the activity sponsor and they get a little bit more information about the activity and we start to draft that agreement. Once the agreement is drafted and we're all on the same page, collect the fees, make sure the COI is what we need, and then we work on execution of that legal agreement or the LOA, which is a slightly more simple process without legal's involvement.
And to touch on, what the process was before, for people that weren't aware, the process was just to directly contact the park or forest. And there wasn't like a form. It was, just an email or a call and say, hey, I want to have this event. And, it was a lot of back and forth. So that's why I know, this is some of the, I want to say, growing pains. I know some people are like, why do you need all this information? That's the information that we would have gotten out of someone over like a series of maybe 5 to 10 emails, where we just try to simplify the process and say, hey, this is the information we really need to know first to make a determination if the event can be held, or we need it in order to draft the agreement. The process before, it didn't allow for centralized tracking and follow-ups. So here in central office, we didn't really have a finger on the pulse as far as what was out there because it was being started at the park or the forest. And it created agreement emergencies when we didn't really need to. And it was stressful for park staff, forest staff, as well as the event sponsor. I don't think anyone thinks that, the Friday before your event, you don't know if you have an agreement or not. So that was also part of the reasoning for wanting to just centralize the intake. Communication was at times inefficient, and is especially true when requests involved multiple locations. Now we get the request, and the person in central office coordinates with all of the locations. Before it was kind of like a grassroots effort of like, okay, I'm the one that got this request, but now I need to send it to each of my fellow forest districts. Oh, wait, there's 2 state parks in there. So it was kind of a messy communication that we tried to clean up and make it more efficient. I know some of the other, trying to streamline and make more efficient some of, again, I keep saying pain points, some of the things that we've heard, feedback on, this information collected from activity sponsor. I mean, that is a big one, in that, like, there's things that probably there's maybe an educational component of it, just some of the things that, since you are entering into a contract with the Commonwealth, for example, we can't enter into contracts with fictitious entities. You either, are a person doing business as, an entity, or you yourself are entering into the contract, or you're registered with the Department of State. With this, certificate of insurance, you have to be, it has to have like a contractual tie back to the person having a sponsor. So I understand that some things may seem bureaucratic, but those are things that are needed in order to enter into a contract with the Commonwealth.
And I do want to add, this process, we did our best to explain it on the website. So we do try to direct organizers to the website if they are confused about the process. And we'd love feedback. If you've gone to our website and say, hey, we still don't understand, please tell us. We want to make sure that that information is out there. So there's a lot more detail on the website about the process, and we will continue to update that. So in addition to updating our process, we most recently updated some fees. The updated fee structure really was created to provide consistent minimum fees for activities, and we're applying that consistency across all state parks and forest districts. Again, to avoid that different experience that you're getting at different parks and forests. So trying to hit more on that consistency piece as we move along with the updated fee structure. And this, like I said, this is the newest piece to the puzzle that we've updated. So yeah, again, this was done to address the biggest complaint, which was the consistency piece. The fee is per activity or term, not per the agreement. So an agreement can hold several different activities per the agreement. And then one thing we will continue to do is we'll continue to update the process and fees as needed as we continue to collect feedback. We've done a lot of work over the past year and a half maybe, but at some point we need to pause and do that feedback and data collection piece and revisit as needed to update where we can.
And something else to touch on the fees is that there is no application fee, in that we don't collect anything upfront. The only time you pay a fee is if you are actually going to get to hold your event. So it's not like, it's an upfront $25 fee that you pay regardless of whether you're approved or not. If we can accommodate you, we'll let you know, and then there's nothing out of your pocket. When you pay is when you are actually approved to hold the event and you get your agreement. So this is a summarization of the fee schedule. This is the minimum fees, and it doesn't contain, I want to say, all the fees and circumstances. And saying that, for example, there's a nonprofit group. We have LOA, the letter of authorization as the activity type. That may or may not. It is so activity specific in the size, the impact, the liability. For example, you might have a 5K that's 25 people that were like, sure, that fits onto a letter of authorization. But you might have hang gliding, which is a very risky activity, of 5 people, but we still might put you on activity agreement because we really need that insurance. So it really, it is, we have found that there's no one way where we could put on the website, if you do this activity, this is what it's going to be, because it depends on the amount of people, the size, the frequency. Some people may fit into the category of letter of authorization, but they know they're going to do it for 5 years, so they choose to get into an activities agreement because they will actually save on the administrative fee. So it is very event specific, sponsor specific as far as what they feel if they're going to come back. They want to have multiple events. covered under that agreement. So I just wanted to note that.
Yeah, and what you're seeing on the screen is a very simplified version of what our staff uses to assess fees. Like Heather said, it can get very complex depending on your activity type. So it's really hard to say if this, then absolutely that. So, and I also want to mention that there's many buckets of activities that don't even have fees assessed. So like, medical or emergency search and rescue trainings, those kind of trainings are happening all the time on state forest land. Those folks aren't getting a fee. There's other activities that aren't being assessed fees as well, where it makes sense. So this is just a snapshot to give you an idea of the complexity of the fee structure.
And the other complexity is this is meant to be the minimum fee, because we found that was the request of our staff. Just tell me, much like we have our campsite fees set up, where you have your base rate, and then depending on if it's a holiday weekend, you have an additional rate. If you have electric, it's an additional. If it's full hookup, you have additional. That's kind of what this was meant to replicate, where you might have this fee schedule is completely fine for Lyman Run, but then you go to other parks like Point or Presque Isle, where the fee structure is appropriate for it to be higher. So that's what, again, the disclaimer of this is this was just meant to standardize the minimum fee. And then the fees that are higher are approved at the regional level. So there is a layer of oversight and appropriateness for those increased fees. We've also done planning because we are looking at, what activities are appropriate because of the increase, and we'll show the statistics in the next couple slides. We are contemplating, I don't want to say capacity, but should we, and these are the philosophical questions that we're asking ourselves, should there be a race on the Delaware Canal towpath every Saturday and Sunday? Or should there be a day for people just to recreate without, 200 runners running by? Should there be, I'm trying to think, a festival every weekend at this specific park? Or should it be open for people just to freely recreate? So that's why our staff has drafted an activity management plan that guides parks to make decisions, related to activity management. It addresses prohibited areas. Before all of this was kind of in our park manager's head that they've just passed on. We've kind of memorialized, for example, again, we're not trying to be overly prohibitive, but like natural areas. I don't think we would ever approve like an organized activity through a natural area. There's always exceptions, but just due to the why it was set up as a natural area. Prohibitive activities, there could be a park that just finds an activity is just wholly incompatible with that park. And so they would memorialize it in that agreement, and as well as capacity of areas. For example, you have a day use area and someone with an 1,000-person event wants to come through, and you have parking lot, parking for 25 people. So either we accommodate via, designated parking areas, we accommodate via shuttling, or at the sponsors, responsibility, or we say, hey, this area is this capacity, but we have a day use area that can certainly fit that. Why don't you consider having your event over here? And so it's a conversation. It's not just like a no, like a cookie cutter. No, you didn't, do all the right things, so therefore no. It's a conversation that we have with people requesting. And certainly, and each plan is unique based on the operation. So that's why we didn't want to say no events on the 4th of July, because there are some events that are completely appropriate for the 4th of July, such as the event that Pittsburgh holds every year at Point State Park. We can't say no events on Christmas because we have the Washington, the crossing of the Delaware at Washington Crossing. So that's why we didn't want to make these blanket statements. So that's why it's very park to park specific. And then, the use and effectiveness of the plans will be reviewed over the fall, winter. So we asked our managers to draft these plans. We want to get feedback as far as, are they actually useful? Are they helping you guide, helping you memorialize, how to manage? And then I'll turn it over to Jess to talk about forestry planning.
So very similar to state parks, we have activity guidance that we are trying to follow as well. East Forest District, though, operates under a bureau-wide activity guidance, and that's to provide that consistency piece, to provide consistent and sustainable recreation. And I will say the activity guidance, this is another newish piece to the puzzle. It's probably something that has been done over time. Forest districts and recreational staff have been operating this way, but we've put it into a formalized document that we want to make sure all of our districts are following that same formalized document, again, to create that consistency piece. Our activities guidance does, it accounts for things like hunting season. So for example, the first day of rifle, we're not going to want a bunch of races going on in the woods. Smaller events, sure. But we want to try to be cognizant of hunting season, first day of trout, spring gobbler, those kind of things, to not say no to all events, but hey, let's consider that we don't want to have large, complex events during those overlapping times. It's impact to the resource, and it's also staff and user safety. We also think about our staff that are managing the forest districts, our rangers. They're busy working on other areas. So we want to make sure everybody's able to use the forest safely at the same time. We also account for large, complex activity limits per district. So we don't want, let's say 3 different large races in a district at the same time. Again, that's impact to the resource and our staff resources. If something happens over in this part of the district for this event, a safety concern that, we need to address, and something happens over here, our staff has to, travel back and forth, and we might not have the staff to address both safety issues. So we want to consider how many large, complex activities we're having in a district at the same time. We're also considering our high-use recreational holidays, Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Labor Day for, again, looking at those large activities. Not saying you can't have your wedding or, your 4-H event, those smaller activities on those large holidays, but definitely want to consider what large events we're having during that same time. We also recognize in our guidance high-use organized activities that while we want to be consistent across all forest districts, we do have some outliers that are just different. We have some districts that are just determined to be high use, and we are working to develop specific guidance for those specific districts for overuse and resource impact. So a really good example of this is Michaud. Our Michaud Forest District, it gets a lot of use compared to our other districts, and we need to be cognizant of that and provide different guidelines for that district that sits outside of our traditional bureau-wide guidance. And again, this is something that we'll continue to review for effectiveness, providing data and feedback from the users and our event organizers, and continue to tidy it up as needed.
So some statistics for state parks. The centralized web application went live July 14th, 2025. From July 14th to December 31st. Sorry, I think that was supposed to mean 2025. Bureau of State Parks received a total of 682 requests, and most of these requests contain multiple activities, and on average about 4 activities. So it gets complicated real fast whenever it's not just I want to have, X activity on X date. It's I want to have X activity, or it could be XYZ activity in like multiple places and then different dates. So it is so case by case basis as far as what that specific event is, or commercial service or guide. From January 1st to January 17th of this year, we received a total of 1,185 requests, and most of these requests continue to contain multiple activities, and on average contain about 4 separate activities. So you take that 1,185 and you multiply that by 4, and that's really the landscape of what we're looking at. So comparison, last 25 weeks of 2025, 682, and the first 25 weeks of 2026, 1,096 requests. And so that's over 1.5 more requests than 2025. And I think we found that since COVID over the last 5 years, the requests have just exponentially increased. So I guess that's a good measurement of all the efforts of outdoor recreation. If you want a success story on that, it's just noting the number of requests that we have that we're, let's say, trying to address at the same time.
So, and just some quick statistics from the Bureau of Forestry. And as you can already see, the amount of events that we host on state forest land is drastically less than state parks. In 2025, there were 269 total activities. And in 2026 to date, there are 266 activities. Now, I will say we haven't done the best of job calculating our statistics in the past. That's something we are getting better at. So our 2025 statistics beyond that, I think, get a little sketchy and inaccurate. So that's why you only see a couple of numbers here. But as you can see, already in 2026, we have close to what we had in all of 2025. So the program is growing, it is evolving, there's more interest, and we're trying to meet that demand. Overall, though, some statistics, our highest use districts are Michaud, Bald Eagle, and Rothrock, pretty much in that order. Most popular activities are foot races, mountain, gravel biking activities, and hiking-related activities. And like I said, the activities continue to evolve and grow, and we're trying to meet that demand. And we have some future items that we're looking to address yet.
So for the future, this program, the activity program, is still in improvement status. We are not patting ourselves in the back saying, good job, our job's done. This is kind of just like a stepping point to where I think, want it to be, that we hope, getting feedback, everyone wants it to be. We're taking time. I think right now we're taking, I want to say a pause. We're taking time to assess the changes that we have made, to make sure that if we need any improvements, they don't get lost in an overall sea of changes. Certainly not the stopping point. This is what we have on the screen is our future to-do / wish list, and we are currently working to find solutions that meet our needs. So future efforts. Right now, filming and photography is kind of in this bucket. If you want to have a filming or do photography, you apply under the same application. We're contemplating, do we need a specific film agreement? Because right now I think it's kind of like trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. Could we have a separate application process to create an offshoot for people only wanting to do this certain activity? This is our huge wish list, which we're working towards: online application and permanent agreement routing. So the desire is to have that transparent process where both DCNR and the applicant can see where the permanent agreement is in process. Even though I said it's not like a DEP permit, I think we're looking at can we leverage that same concept of DEP permitting where I've never personally been through one, but from what it was described, you apply, and then if you don't have it completed, you can't go past go. It lists your deficiencies, and then once you put in the information needed, it'll go to the next process. And then if something needs to be updated, it'll contact you, and you'll know right immediately after someone reviews it what is needed. So that would be the method to communicate information instead of through email. Again, we're trying to solve something that could be done through an online platform instead of like 20 emails back and forth. For example, the applicant could see outstanding information needed in order to proceed. So you might get an email saying, response returned from DCNR. You can go in and be like, oh, I need my COI. I need to submit my fish and boat permit, and easy peasy upload it. And then we're also looking at the potential for online payment as well. So again, it could be, I don't want to say completely remote because we don't want to completely, make that relationship, be behind a screen. But that way it wouldn't have to be mailed in, or you wouldn't have to, visit the Park or District office. And guides, we're currently looking at, do guides fit in the current process, or do they need a different process? And we're currently getting feedback from guides, and that would be commercial guides such as, fishing, boating, hunting, even hiking. And that's where there's still a lot of crossover that we're looking at what is best for this category of experiences.
So yeah, and that's really all we have today. It was a lot, but I do want to stress, like Heather said, this is not a done process. We've done a lot of work over the past year and a half, but there's more work to do, more feedback to assess, it's hard to cast a wide net and have everybody fit into that same bucket. So where do we need to piece out those parts and address everybody's needs? So it's a work in progress.
At this time, we can entertain a few questions. I'm sure Bob has a few.
No, actually, Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask that we hear from the next two speakers because they may answer a lot of the questions that I've written down here. So that would be my preference.
Okay. If that's permissible with the board, I think that's a good idea. So if we can have Sierra and Dave present and then entertain questions to both. Hopefully there.
Go ahead, Sierra.
Okay. Hi, guys. Sierra Fogel here. I know most of you, sorry I couldn't be there in person today. So we are whitewater rafting and we are a biking company. And my comments today are around the biking side of the business. As a whitewater rafting company, we're a concessionaire and that process is a little different. So I'm talking today for our biking side of the business, which we use the name Pocono Biking for that. And I guess my first point is that our experience this season was more similar with Mark's comments at the beginning of the meeting. Our biking business operates in 3 state forests and 2 state parks. And in the past, I agree with Heather and Jessica, consistency was an issue. So we didn't know what to expect when applying for 1 state forest versus another one, or 1 state park versus another one. And we were under different agreements and different layouts across all of them. And so I agree with Heather and Jessica on trying to come up with a consistent way so that the person looking for a CUL or looking for an agreement knows exactly what to expect. And so we were in support of this change from a couple of years ago when we were asked to participate in a focus group on this topic. In practice, this winter, and all I can be is honest, was rough. So we spent countless hours trying to get our agreements corrected and right and done before we got busy for the season. And we entered the season without agreements because they were not done. And they got corrected and completed after we felt the need to elevate them. And so I do have to thank Director Hallis and Deputy Secretary John Norbeck for helping us work through all of this. And we do have agreements now and we have worked through the process. But similar to some of the things Mark brought up earlier, my husband and I do this full time. This is our livelihood. This is our job to make this happen. This is how we pay our employees. This is how we get people outside. This is our jobs. So it made sense for us to take the time to try to figure this out and get it right and get it going. But a lot of the events that happen in the state parks are happening with volunteers or small nonprofits or much smaller companies that don't have full teams to spend hours and hours trying to figure out how to navigate all of this. And so I am a little concerned that we're going to lose some of the smaller events or activities that really promote locals getting outside and recreating in our spaces, because we did find the process to be quite confusing and frustrating, honestly, this winter. We've been operating in the state park, our local park, for decades. We, as a rafting company, we were there before the state park, and we've always had a good relationship with everyone that we've worked with, and we've always felt like a partner. And this winter, we really didn't feel like a partner. We felt like we were being targeted and singled out, and we were actually yelled at certain points for things that we weren't doing. So it was pretty frustrating for us. Like I said, it all came out in the wash. We have our agreements now, and now we're just hopeful that moving forward for next year, the process goes more smoothly and continues, and now everyone knows what to expect. I do agree with Heather and Jessica, there'll be some growing pains, and some of it was growing pains. But I didn't want to get up here and sugarcoat it, but I don't want to be the squeaky wheel, but I just needed to be honest about our experience with the new process. I can
Well, then
yeah.
I said, I'll jump on and throw sugar on this then. Yeah. And I don't know how or why, but I've had a very smooth process over the last 6 to 9 months through this. So hopefully things are improving. I've been getting our commercial activity agreement earlier than I had in previous years, which is great. I remember one time getting it the day before the event. So I was like, well, it's happening. I guess this is how I get canceled if I didn't get it. So I've gotten them in a much more timely manner. I think going back to something Sarah said, like as a full-time person doing this, yes, it becomes much more of a priority than when I was doing this part-time, and then I would send something in and then move on with other things and my day job and other stuff. And then I go, oh, I haven't seen about the permit yet. So maybe it was on me for not following up. I don't know. I think because I'm sure, Sierra, you were following up plenty in the last few months, so it's probably not it. But having heard from other people who do this as a passion project or a side gig or those things, if there were ways to earlier in the process say, okay, this is, I don't know if the term memorandum of understanding would work, but it's like, you're on your way. Now we're going to go through the checkpoints. You can open registration. You can, commit to, getting the insurance because that's going to be a price you need to do early on. Like there's things that happen early on. It'd be great to go, barring legal issue or barring crossing of I's and T's, there are things that still may stop this from getting a permit, but you're 80% there, go forth with doing the other things you need to hold an event. That I think would be helpful for especially new events trying to get started, because I've talked to some, they're like, well, I never got a permit. So then I didn't know if I could have the event. So we didn't hold the event. And then I opened registration 30 days before and I got like 20 people. So if there's a step in that process that can be, you're well on your way, move forward, that would be great. I don't know how to do that legally. That's all your jobs. I think that's the feedback I have. I do have someone that does help me with this, and I should have reached out to him beforehand, but we just had our event this weekend, and well, that's another story for another day because it didn't happen, and then it was great after it didn't happen. But anyway, so I'm still kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. So sorry I didn't come up with more detailed of how we got there, but maybe I am like showing that the learning curve is now kind of going in the right direction based on what's happened in the last couple of events. So I'll be that ray of hope. Can I add something real quick about, I don't know if this is the right time, but I would also like to add some commentary on the glamping presentation as well. So let me know when's a good time to do that.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think that is a tremendous opportunity for the cycling community. Bike touring has always been a big thing. Bike packing is now an element, just a new term basically, of people who ride their bikes with lots of gear. But it's becoming more bike touring, which is I want an established place to sleep versus carrying my tent and all that stuff and kitchen gear and those things because it's heavy. And in Pennsylvania, it's especially arduous to ride a bike with that much gear on your stuff. So having cabins and glamping opportunities where I can ride with a lighter setup to places is part one that I think is going to be great. And making connection of those things is going to be a real asset to this state. Part B is the cycling clientele tends to be a slightly higher income bracket clientele versus hikers and stuff. And so they will be attracted to a glamping setup. It is prettier than a cabin. They're going to be drawn to it tremendously. I have done routes in Colorado that are hut to hut. I don't know if you all know about those, but those are great setups where things are there and I don't need to ride fully loaded. And I know Vermont is starting that trail process as well. So if there's a way Pennsylvania can have our own system of this, I always thought hunting cabins would be a good one for that, but that seems to be hard to do. But maybe this is the glamping one of ways. Here are the 12 around the state, and here's how you can connect the dots of those, I think would be a real boon to the gravel cycling Pennsylvania. All right, thank you.
At this time, can we entertain questions for Heather and Jessica first? Questions relative to the process and agreement dates.
If I could just make a comment, during Mark's presentation, John Norbeck texted me and said he'll sit with bureau directors and really give staff the attention and assistance they need to make sure we clear some of the hurdles and get some clear answers and keep moving the needle on this so that we get to the point we all want to get to on this. And we want to open up the opportunities for events because it does get more people outdoors. We want to preserve the opportunity for 13 million people who own parks and forests to come and enjoy them and know what to expect. Like, you know, if you're looking for the quiet situation, you want to know not to go into the heart of a big event. And we know we have a ways to go. I just wanted to make it clear on the top that our team's going to get a lot of support from leadership to keep this moving in the right direction, you know, simplify, streamline, make it clear and obvious. The IT solutions that were alluded to, I would just ask for some patience on that. That does take time in government, just be completely honest. You know, cybersecurity is like an issue. And so there'll be some, you know, when we get to the point where we need IT solutions to help the clarity that was referred to, like, you know, where your app is. That may take a little time, but I think we can do a lot more up top. And I see, you know, Kurt Sullivan, our chief counsel, on, and I know his staff will be committed to help make this better for everyone. So I just wanted to say that up top before we have questions.
Thank you. Geraldine, you had a question?
Yes. Yeah, I remember Heather and Jessica coming and presenting a few years ago when they were starting this evaluation of the process and all. And one of the things I just couldn't remember was there a third party that was coming in to help kind of brainstorm the process and simplifying the process, still being effective? Did that ever happen? Was there a third party or no?
Yeah, not that I recall us hiring a contractor. We certainly have had, like Ricky Durst has helped us with the guides conversation as far as, you know, if it should be an offshoot, but we have not hired a third party to help us with this.
Okay, I was just wondering that. And then my second question was just like on average, like we heard from Mark, we've heard from Sierra, we heard from Secretary Dunn and her commitment and the Bureau Director's commitment to this, you know, helping move this process along. But what is the average time for someone from start? Like Mark was saying, you know, he put his in January 7th and his event is August and he's still waiting to hear. Is there roughly an average time that it takes as you move through the process from beginning to completion with your agreement?
So that one's hard to quantify. It depends on a lot of situations. Certainly, our desire is to respond within 30 days. Our desire is to respond earlier than that. I know there was some delay because the staff member that State Parks has had some training in the early winter. So, you know, with that person being gone for 3 weeks, that might have added, you know, to the delay of that. But it really is the responsiveness of DCNR, but also the responsiveness of the event requester, where, you know, we might, if it's a complete application, then great, we can, you know, send it to the park or the forest and, you know, start working on it. If there are some, you know, clarifications we need as far as, you know, what is the, you know, event sponsor, like, because we have to enter an agreement with the person, you know, as a register with Department of State. So sometimes that takes a little bit of teasing out of people as far as how, you know, what their company name actually is. And, you know, certificate of insurance, sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's more difficult. If we find that some organizations, they have a parent company that they get insurance through. So there's specific wording that we have to get on there to show that I don't say chain of custody, but agreement chain. I guess I'm not answering your question other than it depends on the responsiveness of both sides. There are some that we have had to notify that like we haven't heard from you in weeks to months. Like we really need a response if you're interested in having this agreement. Some people are incredibly responsive and then they get an agreement really quickly. So our desire is always fast as possible, but there's a lot of parameters that may delay that timeline.
Yeah. And some of those parameters that Heather was talking about, like the certificate of insurance details and the name of the entity and that sort of thing, those are just legal hurdles that we folks on the ground can't make those decisions with. We have folks on our legal team that are asking those questions and that sort of thing. But I do like your question because I feel a little embarrassed that I didn't pull those stats, because overall we have had some positive feedback for a lot of folks that have had their ducks in a row and had all the information that they are getting better response times and their applications fulfilled quicker. So I did make a note to try to pull that information at some point in time.
You're wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was focusing on those that are organized and, kind of going through it. If you were seeing an increase in, expediting that and completing it faster than before.
I would say we are, but I don't want to try to pull a number out of my head. I would like to look at some of our details before we would answer that.
That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other?
Kenny.
Ken, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. A couple of questions. The statistics on how many more applicants you've received of late than a year ago. How much of that is people becoming cognizant of the program that just went and used the parks or the forest without having the permit? A group of 15, 20 people want to have a picnic and they just show up, whereas now they may need a permit. The other question I have that concerns me is, do we have a human element with each application because it's electronic? I will use the comparison of the recent launch of the TILVA program by Extension, where if you get a response from TILVA that you're not satisfied with, you respond to that in an inquisitive manner, and a human will come back to you with some information. So it's assigned to a human element, because many people that apply are electronic savvy and prefer not to talk to people, but many others want a human advocate on the other side of the permit process. So do we have a human on the applicant side from DCNR? I was quite concerned when I heard that someone applied and then the person responsible went for training for 3 weeks. We should have some type of system of checks and balances that things don't fall through the cracks of the colander. So those are my questions. How many people do we have facilitating these applications? How long does the average application take? Do we have someone assigned to each application moving forward, because it's a new process? And how many of the application number increases are a result of just people being more cognizant? I know it's a multifaceted question, but it gives better perspective on where we are.
I can say we absolutely have a dedicated person on the other side of that application that is working with organizers. It's a dedicated staff member. It's not, at least for forestry, it's not a portion of their job where they're working on these. This is their job, where they are reviewing applications with their own eyes and moving it forward, getting that human aspect. So the online application is just to get consistent information in a tidy form for that person to review. As far as application timing, unfortunately, I don't have that information in front of me, but we will work to get some of that.
For state parks, I mean, certainly we talk about growing pains, and the example I gave, yeah, like we don't, you aren't going into like an AI chat bot, like there's a human that receives the application. We've, now installed, the redundancies as far as the supervisors, the backup. I'm the backup to the supervisor. We, if someone goes on vacation, we assign that to someone else, another staff member to keep the process moving. So minor pinch point, certainly we do triage as far as if we have 100 events happening in April, they get bumped to the front of the line versus, again, we're trying to figure out the process as far as what is the best with this centralized intake. And I had an answer for your first one, and it's, I apologize. It went out of my.
Can ask about like, is it just more people being aware and applying?
Oh, thank you, Secretary.
And
Thank
you
you.
mentioned the family picnic. I assure you, we're not permitting.
No.
And 40 million people that hit the parks every year, a lot of them are doing that without any agreement because they're doing family picnics.
I think that we always have some people that are unaware, but I don't know if it's an overall uptick. It could be the timing of the year where a majority of the events might have already happened or in the process for that year. A lot of our events are spring through fall. Is certainly when a park or forest would get the direct response, we would direct them back to the central. We would educate them and say, there's now a centralized application. Can you please apply? So there was some education that went along with it. So I don't think, like I said, always going to have a couple people that we have to educate, but it could be a variety of factors. As far as reiterate that, we aim for no more than 120 days, but as far as, from application to processing, but again, there's the learning curve as far as we're learning as well, how to manage it from centralized. It's definitely, I think, helped just from experience from our staff members. I have, the staff member assigned to this program follows up, so there's centralized tracking. So it's not like we just get the application and we send it and we say, have fun. We have someone following up with our park managers saying, hey, this event is 90 days out. What's the status of it? Have you gotten all the things you need? It's 60 days out. Hey, we're getting close. It's 30 days out. Like, hey, we really need those things. So there is accountability and follow up to help, I want to say, force the process, make the process accountable and make it happen.
And a follow-up question, if I may, how many staff members do you have assigned to this program in Harrisburg? And as a general rule, where does the bottleneck lie? Does it lie with the legal department, or does it lie with just staff being overwhelmed with applications, or where does the bottleneck lie? Because I know on the working with as a forester laying out oil and gas wells across the landscape, when they file for a permit with the DEP, they're required to respond to them within 30 days. So do we have adequate staff to respond timely to these? But I'm just kind of curious of how many staff you have responding to these permits, and if legal is the bottleneck or where the bottleneck exists.
I will say for the forestry side of things, we do have that one dedicated staff member that 100% of their time is devoted to this, as well as a couple others within that recreation section that works to help with that, but it's not 100% of their time. And I think on the Bureau side, we do have the adequate staff to manage our numbers that we have, which is less than state parks. I would be remiss if I didn't say that, yes, sometimes the legal aspect is a little bit of a bottleneck. And some of it is getting down to those nitty-gritty details of the certificate of insurance and the official legal name that you have on your agreement. That can sometimes be an issue for our legal team, and rightly so. I know they're crossing their T's and dotting their I's. So that does create a bit of legal back and forth that does extend the timeline.
Yeah, I think it is a variety of factors because we can't just say like any one thing is a bottleneck, because I think there's some event sponsors that can get their agreement very timely, and some it can get hung up on those few details. So I don't know if just looking at the number of days from application to when you actually have your agreement in hand is a good measure of success, because there's a lot of, I want to say, I don't know, gates, or I don't want to say roadblocks, it sounds prohibitive, but stopping points or check-in points where, okay, we're now at this point in the process, we need your COI and we need your payment, or we need this permit needs to be filed, or things like that. So every agreement is, or activity is unique in that some it may pass with flying colors because all the ducks are in a row, and some there are, challenges to work through. But as far as state parks, we have one staff member in central office devoted to that. Certainly, we have the backups of supervisors and other people helping if need to be. But also, it goes out to then all of our field staff, or all of our park managers have a role in reviewing and assigning special conditions. So I think it is, we can't really prescribe if there is a delay in the process to any one of those points.
In how many staff members total are dedicated to this program?
Completely dedicated would be one. This is one of many hats that our park managers wear. But eyeballs on the applications would be one.
One for parks, one for forestry, 100% of their time. Like Heather said, portions of other folks in the field and supervisor's time is devoted as well.
Well, based on the number of applications we saw in your presentation, that person's pretty busy.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's not uncommon. For forestry, you have one staff member dedicated to 4,400 camp leases. So it's a continual ebb and flow as far as the information coming in, the task coming in. Certainly no one would argue with more people, but certainly I could say that one task member being 100% of or one staff member 100% of their time is certainly an improvement of what we had before. So we're very thankful to have that position dedicate their time.
Unlimited.
And the legal department, my concern is the state has limited tort, so we can't get bogged down in details and keep the public off of our public land, because I know from the northern tier, most of the private land now is owned by people from out of state that bring their out of state cultures to Pennsylvania and lease their land and lock a lot of our public out of it. So we at DCNR have to really work harder to get the public the ability to use the public land. So I caution us on getting caught up in bureaucracy and having our programs backfire on us and turning our citizenry away from the access to our public land.
Hey, and that's addressing liability is certainly a delicate dance that we do. We don't want to be overly prohibitive, but we certainly do want to protect the Commonwealth when we need to. Some of these activities are very risky, and some of these activities people do unfortunately get injured or worse. I won't talk about the worst, but and that's what, but it is a very real dollars and cents as far as if there's, a settlement for an injury, or that comes out of our budget. So we do have to fiduciarily protect ourselves as well. So that's why we do have, at some points, insurance requirements for third-party events.
Yeah, can I just add on? Yeah, we definitely spend a lot of effort trying to welcome people to public lands. Our whole mosaic effort, our recreation effort, almost everything we do is really getting a trail and a park within 10 miles of every Pennsylvania and adding state parks. We were with you on that, Ken. I do think the users on an event and the users are just regular users coming in. That's part of the agreement process. Is people show up, they maybe drive an hour or 2 hours to a new park they haven't been to. They don't know the event's going to be there. So part of the management of events is the 13 million people who own these parks and forests. The paradigm is that they're there for you, they're yours, and you can go anytime because you own them. And that welcome mat's always there. And events are a special thing. And one of the benefits is it brings in new people who may not otherwise go to a park or forest, or particularly that park or forest. But there is a bit of a rub there between the open, free park that's there for everyone all the time versus the big event, which might provide an atmosphere you're not looking for in your picnic, for instance. So that is part of the rub here. But the welcome mat is definitely a big part of it. And we're really trying to dial up, frankly, these events, but do it in a way that doesn't eclipse the other folks that are regular users or maybe new users trying a new park. So that is part of the rub in recreation management.
In respect of time, I'd like to move on because we're kind of in a time constraint in respect for other people's time. Does anyone have any kind of question for Sierra or Dave on their presentation? Anybody in the? Okay. Is this relevant to the?
Are you?
Jerry, turn your
No, it's not.
Yeah. Are you respectful when you have these event permitting process, respectful of certain areas like our Bob Weber natural and wild area, so that certain group events are not allowed in those kinds of areas?
Yeah, that's part of the assessment process. And that's part of when somebody submits an event, we do ask that specific location. And if it's a race or something, what is the complete route of that race so that we can assess if it's in a natural or wild area.
Good.
Okay, Bob, any questions relevant to Sierra and Dave's presentation?
I could twist it into that, but I just have something to say.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I got a lot of notes here, and I think they're probably best saved for the internal CONRAC discussion on how we're going to respond to the public comment we got. The one thing that always gives me pause on these, and Ken hit on it, is the limited tort and the idea that these activities that people are planning events around happen randomly in the parks every day. Kayaking, dirt biking, gravel road biking. And so why they're treated differently from a legal standpoint, I'm not talking staffing, from a legal standpoint, when it's done as a group, gives me pause. And the other thing I like to say is I can assure you there's nothing more misunderstood or not understood by Joe Public than insurance and insurance certificates and fictitious names, okay? And all of these things are leading to your problems. And I think if we can address some of these simple things, this is a big problem. And the thing that I'm looking for, Rocco, my last comment is, we don't want Secretary Fun Dunn to lose her title over this.
You're right.
Well, people would tell you in the office, I say, we have risk. There's no way not to own risk. 2.2 million acres of forest land, 125 state parks, the largest land in the state. We know there's risk, and we know there's limits to, what framework we can do around that. Our main thing is, keeping people safe and helping event organizers think that through too.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Can we move on to our last public comment period? Ryan, do we have anybody?
I don't see anybody with a hand up in the Teams. Sure there's any members of the public left in the audience.
Hearing and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our business meeting at this time.
I'll second that. I'll make the motion. We talked about this earlier, didn't we? Yeah, okay.
Okay. Would someone like to second the motion?
So seconded.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Thank you for attending.
Aye.
And Presenters, thank you very much for your presentations. That ends our meeting.